In this video recorded lesson, I will be discussing about percentiles. When we say percentile, it shows the value below which a given percentage of observation falls. So for example, 90th percentile. This is 90th percentile, and this is its t-value, which is 1.316. So this is the 90th percentile. Where the left tail is 90% or 0.90. It says here that it shows the value below which a given percentage of observation falls. So 90th percentile means 90% of the distribution falls below it. Now, if this is 0.90, what is the value of the shaded area? It is 0.10. Paano natin nakuha ang 0.10? So, since sabi natin yung area ng normal curve is equal to 1, so 1 minus 0.90, which is yung area ng yung area dito sa left, then this will be equal to 0.10. So, yung area ng shaded area, yung value ng shaded area is 0.10. So, we will encounter about the upper tail and lower tail later on. So, let's first define them before we have our examples. The upper tail contains the upper values in a distribution, while the lower tail contains the lower values in a distribution. In the illustration presented, which of the tails do you think is an upper tail or lower tail? Upper tail is the one on the right, or the right tail, since sabi natin kanina na ang upper tail contains the upper values. Since nakikita natin dito yung mga mas mataas na values sa right side. So, yung mga positive values. And lower tail is on the left side. Since makikita natin yung mga lower values dito sa left side ng ating normal curve. Nandito yung mga negative values. So, let's have our first example. The test score of 5 students that were selected from 11 STEM Maxwell students has a t-value which is equal to 1.19t. What percentile does it represent? First step, we need to solve for the degrees of freedom. Since our sample size is equal to 5, our degrees of freedom would be 5 minus 1, which is equal to 4. And then using the t-table, we're going to use the degrees of freedom, which is 4, and the t-value, which is 1.190, to find the lower tail probability. Hanapin natin ang lower tail probability. Yung degrees of freedom natin na 4 is nandito. So, let's box yung 4, yung row kung saan yung degrees of freedom na 4. And then, hanapin natin yung t-value na 1.90 doon sa row ng degrees of freedom na 4. So, nandito yung 1.190 and then, i-box ulit natin. And then, titignan natin dito yung cumulative probability. And yun ay yung 0.85. So, 0.85 or 85%. Ibig sabihin, yung 1.190 is yung 85th percentile. And 85th percentile corresponds to 85% or 0.85. So, ito yung ating lower tail probability. Now, ano naman ang ating upper tail probability? kapag ang ating lower tail is 0.85. So, 1 minus 0.85, that is equal to 0.15. So, ito ang ating upper tail, 0.15. So, anong ibig sabihin ng percentile na ito? So, since the test score is 85th percentile, it means that the 5 students scored better than 85% of all the 11 STEM Maxwell students. Or pwede ring mas mataas ang nakuhang score ng 5 students na ito than the rest of yung 11 Maxwell students. Or 15% scored the same or better than the 5 students. So let's have another example. The mean height of all participating basketball players under 21 years old category is 170 centimeters. If randomly selected 12 basketball players has a mean height of 175 centimeters and t-value of 2.201, what percentile does it represent? So first, let's solve for the degrees of freedom. So, since ang ating sample size is equal to 12, 12 minus 1 is equal to 11. Then we're going to use the degrees of freedom na 11 and yung t-value na 2.201 to find the lower tail probability. Nandito yung ating degrees of freedom na 11. And then dito sa row ng degrees of freedom na 11, hanapin natin yung 2.201 and then dito siya. Then doon sa cumulative probability is 0.975. which corresponds to 97.5%. Nandito ang ating t-value na 2.201 and that is the 97.5th percentile. Then, sabi natin ang ating lower tail probability is 97.5% or 0.975. Now, if this is our lower tail probability, then what is our upper tail probability? So, 1 minus 0.975, this is equal to 0.025. So, itong shaded area na ito is the 0.025. So, what does this percentile mean? Since the height is 97.5th percentile, it means that the 12 basketball players are taller. Yung 12 basketball players are taller than 97.5% of all participating basketball players. Or pwede rin 2.5% have the same height. Or are taller than the 12 basketball players. Okay, so let's have another example. The mean height of all participating volleyball players is 155 centimeters. If the 12 volleyball players have a mean height of 160 centimeters and a t-value of 1.363, what percentile does it represent? First, again, solve for the degrees of freedom. Now, since 12 ang ating sample size, then 12 minus 1 is equal to 11. And then, we're going to use the degrees of freedom na 11 and yung t-value na 1.363 to identify the lower tail probability. So, nandito yung ating 11 na degrees of freedom and nandito naman ang ating t-value na 1.363. And sa cumulative probability is 0.90. So, ang ating lower tail probability is 0.90 or 90%. Nandito siya. And ito naman ang ating 90th percentile. Now, if our lower tail probability is 0.90, ano naman ang ating upper tail probability? So, 1 minus 0.90 is equal to 0.10. And yun yung ating shaded area. So, anong ibig sabihin naman ito? So, since the height is 90th percentile, it means that the 12 valuable players are taller than 90% of all participating valuable players. Or pwede ring 10% have the same height. Or are taller than the 12 volleyball players. For the fourth example, what t-value represents the 75th percentile with 15 degrees of freedom? Ngayon naman, ang hahanapin natin is yung t-value. Paano natin malalaman ang t-value? Then, gagamitin natin ang degrees of freedom na 15 and 0.75 na cumulative probability since ang ating percentile is 75th. So, given na ang ating degrees of freedom, that is 15. So, nandito ang ating 15. And then, yung 0.75 is here. So, yung intersection nila is 0.691. So, that is our t-value. So, nandito yung 0.691. And ito naman ang ating 75th percentile. So, since 75th percentile, then it corresponds to 0.75 or 75% dito sa ating lower tail probability. Now, kapag sinubtract natin ito sa 1, ang makukuha natin is 0.25. So, ito yung value ng ating shaded area. For the last example, suppose 10 respondents were selected from a normal population with a 90th percentile. What is the t-value? Ano ang unang gagawin natin? Kailangan natin i-convert ang sample size into degrees of freedom. So, ang ating sample size is 10. Then, we subtract 1 from 10. Ang makukuha natin is 9. Then, gamitin natin yon. Nandito ang ating 9 na degrees of freedom. And then, since ang ating percentile is 9th, then tignan natin yung 0.90 sa cumulative probability. And nandito siya. Then, yung intersection nila is 1.383. Then, yung ang ating t-value. 1.383. Itong t-value na ito is the 90th percentile. And then, since 90th percentile siya, it corresponds to 90% or 0.90. Yan ang ating lower tail probability. Then, for the upper tail probability, 1 minus 0.10, that is 0.90, that is 0.10. And yun ating shaded area. So, that is how we solve for how we identify the percentile. Kailangan natin ang degrees of freedom and yung t-value. So, I hope you learned something in this video recorded lesson.